Hello and welcome to the gak.co.uk Guitar Shop podcast. I am your host Mark Packham, who is with me this evening.
Hello, my name's Jay. I'm the assistant manager here in the guitar store.
Hello, my name's Matt and I'm the manager.
And I'm Joe and I'm here for all your bass related queries.
Gentlemen, nice to have a full crew again like we did last week. It's becoming a bit of a rarity that we're all here.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, it has been over the last few months.
Yeah, but you know,
Few
we've
months?
been busy.
A couple of months.
I suppose, yeah, I was away for 3 weeks and Matt was away. And
Yeah, I had a few off before that.
yeah, they were good. I enjoyed
I'm always here.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, the best ones are when you were away. I'm always here. I'm like Ken Barlow from Coronation
You want to
Street.
get ever presents?
I'll always be there.
You remind me of the main one in Take That.
Gary
Keating.
Barlow?
Yeah, that's it.
Ronan Keating.
Why?
Well,
Was he take that? Or Boyzone?
you look a bit like
Is
him.
anyone
No,
here
I
going to
don't.
McBusted?
No one's going to... Well, I should assume
I think
a lot
our
of people
acoustic
are.
manager, Dan Grace, is
Oh yeah, he might be going.
No. Oh, no, actually. Maybe.
I don't really know where this is going.
No, neither do I.
Ever present, Mark Packham.
Hello.
The unsung hero.
Saying that I'm ever present, I actually wasn't in the office today to cobble together a podcast like I normally do on a Wednesday. So, unfortunately, I've had to leave it to Joe Branton,
Oh.
who has put together... Hang on, let me just...
Something to do with bass.
There's a lot of pieces of paper. What makes a guitar,
bracket.
in brackets, right for me? Close
End
bracket,
Yeah.
question mark.
Uh-huh.
What does that mean?
Right. I meant from anyone else's perspective other than us. I was like, you know, why does Jay love Baja Telecasters? And, you know, why do I love Yamaha BBs? So I thought of all the individual things that kind of make up a guitar, and I thought we could go through some of the things. So you know, the body, the neck, the pickups, the bridge, and we could talk about what the different options are for each one, sort of on broadly, and then kind of, you know, talk about what would be advantageous for which style. So maybe it can help people lock down onto something that they'd like for actually what it's made from, rather than whether or not it has Fender on the headstock.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
That does actually sound...
It sounds like an informative podcast.
I just thought what we were going to do here was basically build our most
dream
awesome
guitar.
guitar,
No,
and
we're
mine
gonna
would be
talk about
a
options.
10-string 50 pickup Strat.
That doesn't exist. Or hopefully not. Yeah, I mean, that sounds much more informative than we normally do. So, you know, this...
Yeah, I mean, it's a little broader because I suppose we're going to speak about less products in particular, although I suppose we'll use them as reference points
Yeah.
for each of these. But yeah.
Also very timely because there's been a lot of debate on the internet in the kind of guitar world this week as to whether the bodywood of a guitar, what the guitar's made out of, actually makes any difference to what the guitar sounds like.
Has that? That's ridiculous.
I would say yes, it does.
Yeah,
There's
of
been
course it does.
plenty of people on forums who would say not at all. So should we talk about the body first?
Yeah.
What are the three or four areas that you've highlighted? That
Well, I thought the areas I suppose that make a difference really for people with the body is first and foremost I suppose the wood type, because of how that will shape the tone, probably the most out of any of the features about the body, and then the shape of the body as well. I think makes a bit of a.
I don't think so much is... I don't think necessarily it's the shape. I think it's...
Okay, no, sorry.
Oh, what I was going to say is I don't think necessarily it's the shape. I think more it's what you sort of... Okay, if you've got like a blank, if you've got, you know, for example, you know, a block of mahogany or a block of alder or whatever, it's how much you take away from that as opposed to necessarily the shape.
I know
Well,
exactly what
the
you're
total
saying.
mass
Yes.
of,
Well,
yeah.
of wood.
What you're saying is right. I actually don't mean tonally. I suppose for each thing, except maybe pickups and bridge.
Yes.
Although pickups maybe to a little extent for bass, but for each thing there are two things you've got to consider. One is going to be the sound of it, and the other is going to be the playability of it. So kind of when I'm talking about the shape, I'm thinking more about contours, things like that.
Right, okay.
Why a Strat has more contours
Okay,
than a
got
Tele,
ya,
things
okay.
like that. So just things like that, and whether or not that matters to you. And if it does, then would that make you a Strat player over a Tele player?
Do you think that's... I guess this is this sort of opens up to something like how the 2012, the new American Standard Telecasters have got the cutaway.
Yeah, they've introduced that, haven't they? Just
Yeah,
to make
which-
them a bit more of an all-rounder.
What was officially known as a ribcage contour, I believe, but
Yeah.
most commonly referred to as the belly
The
contour.
belly contour.
Because
it's where the belly goes.
Yeah, I mean, if you play your guitar low, which is the right height that it should be.
It's more a pectoral contour for me.
Yes, yes. Or just like a chin contour.
Chin rest for violinists is just like...
but yeah, I guess that's, you know, because the American Deluxe tellies have got the
They've had it for a while,
and so the American Standard, because that was the thing with the American Standard tellies of, you know, the ones when they were rebranded last year, not rebranded but, you know, sort of remodeled, was they sort of really upped the game and really lessened the gap between what you consider the Standard and the Deluxe. You know, by putting the custom shop pickups in the Standard and you know, all of those other bits and bobs, and I think that was one of the things. I mean, personally, I mean, perhaps this is. I mean, I'm not. I guess I'm a bit of a skinny guy, kind of. Maybe that doesn't make a huge amount of difference.
You don't need the belly contour.
Yeah, I mean, is that what it's there for?
But I think it's also there for looks. I mean, you know, if you prefer kind of the classic look of an instrument, I mean, certainly contours were introduced as a modern thing, and they were introduced when playability became a real factor. They were, you know, I mean, certainly for the Strat, you know, after the Telly, and certainly with the jazz bass after the P-Bass, or really the P-Bass 57 upgrade, where it changed from being a slab body to having contours.
Yeah.
Contours were kind of a modern thing, and then they were when people started thinking about how this plays. And a Telecaster, you know, despite, you know, probably certainly within this town being the most popular guitar a Telecaster doesn't have any of those things considered, but part of it, I suppose, is the look.
I mean, you know, I think if you sit down and you play like a telly, maybe something that's like double bound, and you're sitting down and playing it, you tend to find that your forearm and like your elbow and stuff starts to hurt because it's actually scraping against what is actually quite a sharp bit.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of them now are more rounded, but when I grew up on playing a Strat, you kind of don't get that, and that's why when you see relics on custom shops, they're always less worn on that arm bit, because obviously there's a bit more of a contour, so they tend to be worn slightly further down.
And with this podcast, I really wanted to kind of make things about you know, sort of bringing it back to the customer. So you know, when we're saying these things, basically, I suppose what we're saying is those contours are there if playability is a real crucial thing to you, and you really feel that will matter. If you want to take sort of the, you know, the arm marks and the grazing that a Telecaster will give you, then you know, then brilliant, then go for that.
I think when it comes down to body shape, it's very much a personal preference. I don't really even think that one is much more of a modern design. I just think it's how you play. Like, I mean, going back to the telly, I can comfortably, you know, thrash it like just a normal telly for, you know, as long as I'd need to, but
edge ankles.
Well,
so,
yeah, but
you know, it's
edge bound tellies I can't get on with at all.
Yeah,
just that difference between the slight rounding of the edge to the very sharp edge bound.
I completely agree. I think the bound stuff looks great, but I find it very, very difficult to play. I've never got on with the.
You know, a player who's perhaps not quite as aggressive as we might play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they'll be fine, because, you know, it's a great looking guitar, and then, you know, they might play it over the body a bit more. Or they might just use their kind of forearm less. Yeah. As kind of us unsophisticated bass players pretending to be guitarists might do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then I think if you're going to think about these things chronologically, if we're going from kind of the slab body to the contoured Strats, then after that, you would have to consider the extreme shapes. So, you know, so this is where kind of Ibanez and ESP and people like that are come into play. Yeah, exactly. And I think what's crucial to remember that those things were done purely visually.
Yes.
So certainly if you want to play something that's an extreme shape, that's something to get around, and something to even down to things like the Thunderbird bass. You'll notice that most T-Bird players wear their basses very low, because that lower horn gets, if you're wearing it up high, it's very difficult to get your arm over to.
And also
to
it kind of
play the
combats
bass.
the neck dive that is inherent with that design.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, a glaring omission, I would say, there in your kind of chronological order of guitar shapes. The designer series, Gibson 5E and Explorer.
I was gonna say, sorry to interrupt very briefly. What came first out of that? Do you know the timeline on that?
Explorers.
No, same year, right?
I think Explorers were 58.
Yeah, and I'm sure Flying V was 58 too.
Yeah, I think they came out at the same time because there's actually I think BB King played the Flying V for a while, didn't he?
Flying V's a funny one because obviously it's been around for a long time, but they were designed as a kind of futuristic instrument with the Explorer, and is it the Futura? Is that the other one?
Yeah.
Which is the really weird looking one.
Yeah, and obviously now they do the Modern, which was the Gibson that never came to be.
Maybe I'm thinking of the Modern. But for me, because I play guitar primarily sitting down, because I'm a bass player on stage and guitarist at home and recording, the Flying V is pretty much useless for me. Just because you can't sit down with it. It's not designed for that. And if you do, you kind of have to sit in that classical position.
Did the Epiphone versions, they introduced like a small rubber...
They do.
Kind of rubber grip, which makes it a bit better. But I mean, when we say this kind of what makes a guitar right for me, if someone comes in and they're looking for maybe that first step up from their beginner guitar, a lot of the time kids will come in and be like, I've seen a Flying V, I really want a Flying V. The first question to ask is this design right for you? Are you going to be sitting down? Are you still kind of learning guitar, or is this just a stage guitar? If they say, yeah, I'm going to be sitting down, then perhaps it's not the right guitar for you, The
amount of people that get those guitars down and don't rest the V in their knee, almost like you're a classical player, and kind of rest it as though you would rest a Strat, and then the whole body slips, and they tend to find that their knee is on the 12th fret.
Well, exactly.
And you're you have to sit like that, and then you're in such an awkward position and such a strenuous position, I think, especially for someone who's beginning.
Yeah,
it makes things really
I
difficult.
like to call that the fieldy position.
The fieldy.
Where the nut is right up at your head.
Your eye line.
Yes.
It's just, I think it's quite a step to make, choosing an extreme shape.
Although, I mean, Explorer, you can sort of see, but still, I think... It almost feels like it's like when you play a Firebird and the neck just feels so far away. It feels like it's just like it's constantly just getting further away as you go down to the first fret. You're
to some
Whoa!
To some extent, an SG as well, just because of the way that neck joint is. When you sit down with them, the nut does feel like really far away.
Yeah,
it's not like a Les Paul or a Strat or a Tele or more conventional guitar design. I would say that the body shape, you really need to think about what's comfortable for you, but also what's practical for what you want to do with the guitar.
Absolutely.
And again, if you're a kind of slightly smaller person, then perhaps not something like a Gretsch or a 335 where you're going to have trouble reaching over the top and playing around that kind of semi-acoustic shape.
We've also not sort of really talked about Les Pauls at all.
No, I suppose so. I mean, how do you Les Paul basses? I don't know, because actually I probably very rarely, if ever, have sat down with a Les Paul guitar.
Yeah.
But Les Paul basses sit really weirdly on you because you've got so much weight in that lower half of the body, and the horn is so small. So
but haven't you also isn't again? I just would have thought whenever I seen them, I don't think I've ever sat down with a Les Paul bass, but whenever I've looked at them, I just sort of. Again, it's sort of like the headstock's so far away, and there's a big load of weight on there.
Yeah.
It's like
True.
a big headstock.
If you let go of them, it will fall off.
Yeah.
The other way.
Yeah.
The weight.
Oh, it will go really.
Yeah.
Okay, it will go.
Just because there's so much weight
so
on the
much
body.
weight. And I appreciate the body is oversized on a bass, but I've always thought, I love the sound of Gibson Les Paul basses, but I've always thought that it's just so unpractical for me to sort of be able to sit down and play.
For me, actually, if you're talking about Gibson basses, the Les Paul is the one that works, because for me it's the only one that really, inherently in the design, has something to counteract that headstock
what about
dive.
the new one? The EB?
I really like the EBs, but I mean, because they're very, they're kind of they're fendery. They've kind of got that kind of that vibe to it. But the Les Paul kind of works actually because they've counteracted that headstock dive with an oversized, heavy mahogany body. And that's the one that kind of sits. Jets, let's talk about body woods. We mentioned it briefly. That again, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about does the wood that a guitar is made of actually make any difference at all, and there's a few kind of demo videos online and people have been talking about it on forums and stuff. I would say let's just talk about the woods that Fender primarily use, or Fender style guitars, bolt on neck style guitars. I guess primarily ash and alder
and basswood on there.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you say that.
Yeah.
Squire Classic Vibe tellies are pine.
Yeah, well, we've started to see lots of. I mean, I did actually section these off into their whole other section, but I suppose we can lump them in with this because they are a similar tone. You've got basswood and agathis as well.
A lot more on basses.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Are there any guitars that are agathis?
I mean, agathis is basically alder, like in tonally, it's very similar. So, but we're starting to see more of these odder woods, and yeah, it was really nice to see pine kind of turn up on the tellies. It also turned up on the 50s style classic vibe P bass, which was great. Really suited it.
I think the thing about wood is as well. You can older, for example, can vary so much in tone depending on how it's like grown and then actually produced in terms of being cut and dried and its moisture content. And I mean, there's a ridiculous level that you can go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you certainly can when you go into like custom shop sort of level design. You're picking from where that order's cut in the tree to.
They were saying at the custom shop night that we did, the Fender one, they were saying that the master builders have selections of woods that they don't use anywhere else in the custom shop factory. So the master builders even have like a better selection of woods than the standard team built. And they'll get a call saying like, for example, like a 300-year-old church has been demolished in like some southern state in America, and it turns out that all the chairs are made of like 200-year-old swamp ash or something like that, and they buy all this crazy wood that's been used for things like that.
That's amazing.
So they get all these kind of really cool selections.
We should give people an overview of alder and ash.
I was going to say what. So we're talking about these woods, and we've said that they're kind of primarily used, I guess, on kind of bolt-on. Bolt-on guitars modular guitars where the neck is bolted to the body. Assuming that there is a tonal difference, which I think we all agree that there is.
Yeah.
What are the kind of tonal properties of ash, alder, basswood, agathis?
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they? Because I've always known it and I've always been told it from early on when Fender were using ash more. Originally, it was because it looked better in terms of grain for sunburst.
It's definitely
you
more...
get a thicker grain. I mean, I don't necessarily think it looks better. I prefer the look of alder, but that you get a thicker,
it's definitely more
defined grain.
Hollywood.
It's more apparent, definitely, in swamp ash.
So I don't know if that was the original reason why I started using it or not, but alder tends to be, to me, like a darker sounding wood, where ash, I think, because it's...
I'd be careful about using the word dark because they're still on the bright end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a brighter tone of wood in terms of a body wood compared to, say, what a Gibson would use.
Yeah.
But ash, I think because the grain's so much tighter, it resonates quite differently, and it's a much brighter, snappier sounding wood.
Yeah.
So that's why it works really well on, say,
ash,
like a telly.
You get a lot of variation with weight as well. You can get a real heavy
and you can get a really light bit of ash as well.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of it's a bit hit and miss with ash, I think, in comparison to alder, which is just very, very consistent, and it's why alder's used across the board. I mean, I don't know this as a fact, but I would assume alder's the most used bodywood.
I thought so. In terms of guitars that we do, definitely it's alder.
But I mean, in terms of a Fender, I'd say if you're going for a Strat, I think alder to me sounds better. But then I prefer a Strat with, say, like a rosewood board and something that you'd use the neck pickup on a bit darker rhythmically. But on a telly, I'd prefer an ash.
Oh, really? What's the Baja?
Older.
The Baja's older. Yeah. I quite like the. I would agree with you. I think that. I don't know. I really like one of the things I think that's cool to compare is looking at with the Cabernetas, the Mexican Cabernetas, the black and the sunburst one are older, but the blonde one is ash.
Ah, right.
Yeah, and it's and I really really like the ash one. I think the ash one's really really nice. And yeah, I think it is. It's just a little bit. Again, I'm not sure brighter is quite the right word. I don't think it's quite as easy as just saying that one is.
I think if you're just comparing older and ash, I would say that the ash is probably brighter than older.
Yeah, but I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I don't think it's quite. It's not quite the same as just saying, yeah, right. If you want something really trebly, go with the ash one because. It doesn't quite work like that. I
think that varies from guitar to guitar.
Yeah.
What I think I have found, and actually the telly is a really good kind of test subject for this because you kind of know what a telly sounds like.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to compare ash and alder because there is definitely a tonal difference. I mean, Pine, things like when we've had the Telebration Pine guitars in.
Yeah.
Pine sounds worlds apart from either of those two. It's much brighter, much.
Pine's similar to maple.
Yeah, it's very, very bright indeed. And then you get things like the rosewood telly, and certainly the custom shop ones that we've seen that have got completely rosewood bodies. They sound totally different again.
Yeah.
Much thicker. And
along with the Telebration range, that's a really good point. So the Telebration stuff was a range of guitars that came out a couple years ago to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Telecaster. Although I think they were 2011 was.
Something like that, yeah.
Because it depends on what you consider the Telecaster. But anyway, I think the year that they went with was 2011, and that was when we got the that was what they considered the 60th anniversary, and that was that we got some really interesting stuff through, some stuff that like the Rosewood Telly, like the Harrison one, which was never really produced, I don't think.
I think they were in like super limited numbers. I think.
Out of all of those ones, the one that I really, really liked was the Empress.
Yeah, again, Empress wood, something that we've not talked about.
Which is a kind of maple, I believe.
Is it?
Yeah, and it was.
It's a Japanese wood. Yeah,
it was the lightest guitar, well, at least the lightest Fender I've ever picked up.
The guitarist in my band plays an old Japanese Empress Telly, and it's neck heavy.
Really?
Because the body's so light.
So light.
But is it a rosewood neck or maple?
Yeah, rosewood
neck.
neck.
Okay,
it's a 60s bound.
Right. Oh wow, that's really interesting.
They sounded again completely different from any other telly that I've heard for a long time.
And they were incredibly bright.
Yeah.
Really, really, really bright.
See, for me, I love tellies as they are, but those Empress, I just thought worked very, very well indeed.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be like one that people are going to be looking back at and going, oh yeah, why didn't I buy one of those? They just sounded really good, and the whole thing kind of worked. And from that same range, leading us on to another wood that I guess is used quite a lot in guitar building, there was a mahogany telly as well, which sounded much thicker. So this kind of argument that the wood doesn't make a difference, oh yes, there was some kind of some minor pickup changes, and some of them were maple and some of the rose boards, but it was so noticeable on that mahogany telly that the guitar sounded completely different.
I mean, it is always going to be tough, because unless you basically had exactly the same guitar and then you could just swap the scratch plate over and swap the neck over on, say, like a Strat,
you're not going to be able to tell. 100%.
But you'd need a reference point. You'd have to record it all, and
Yeah.
I think overall it's kind of like an overall equation in that, if you start off with X wood that's going to sound, it's going to sound quite like this, and you mix it with another wood that's going to be, say, a lot darker than the body wood you're using, it's probably going to balance it out to be something, that's maybe got a slightly less harsh top end or something like that, Whereas if you used maybe an ash body that might be slightly on the heavy side, that's really bright, and then put an all maple neck on it, that guitar's going to be.
I think that's
really
the thing.
bright.
It is kind of a cumulative effect, but it all does start with that wood. If you go to something really bright, keep adding really bright pickups, really bright, maple board, you're going to have a guitar that is really bright.
Super bright.
If you go, like you say, something that counteracts those, you're going to get something in the middle. Or if you go something, mahogany body with a rosewood board and some really dark sounding humbuckers, you're going to have a dark sounding guitar. It just seems to make sense to me that everything has an impact on the next bit.
Yeah. So where does stuff like Babinga and stuff come into this with basses? Because this is something that I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know a huge amount about. I guess when I think of
woods.
Yeah, I guess that's more the sort of Ibanez type.
I suppose Warwick started it, and then when
yeah.
Warwick kind of became a bit rubbish at what they did, Ibanez picked up where they left off. And you've got things like Evanco, Jatoba, Babinga. Those are kind of the woods that they were using more. All of them, generally speaking, are quite dark, because that was sort of the idea behind Warwick, and I suppose certainly behind Ibanez and their SRs.
Yeah.
They go for these really kind of deep, rich sounding woods, so four bass, and then all the treble and things like that you dial in with the active tone set.
So how much with the exotic woods, how much of that is down to tone, and how much of it is because they look pretty fruity?
Well, this is something that I thought we'd come on to later, but
no,
but let's do it now. I thought it would fall more under pickup, so I'll mention it briefly. I think because those things where we're using, Jatoba, Babinga, and Evanco, generally speaking, are partnered with active pickups, I think that's where this argument of whether or
Kind
not
of.
the wood makes
Right,
a difference.
okay.
I think if you put active pickups,
It kind
which
of
is obviously
falls
much more
apart,
common
yeah.
in bass than guitars, you're putting so much more. You're putting 15 decibels extra volume coming out of the pickups than you would on a passive. You could have those strings wrapped around an ice cream tin, and those pickups would sound
Would
like
still,
that.
yeah,
Because it's
Yeah.
just the volume from the pickups with turning up the volume of the strings without taking into consideration anything that it's going through. So I think, unfortunately for me personally, and there'll be lots of active players that will disagree with this, I think as soon as you go active circuitry, it doesn't matter what you're purely going for something for looks, which is why a lot of the Ibanez SR stuff are things like sported finishes or burled poplar finishes, stuff like that. ESP do them as well.
Just because they look incredible, and
yeah.
it's not making a huge amount of tonal
Well,
difference
it's the
because
same
you've got
as-
such a powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
preamp,
Exactly.
yeah.
Which is why when actually you need woods to sound great. I mean, don't get me wrong, they feel amazing. The SRs, the 1200 series with the Van Cole tops and mahogany bodies and that Babinga Jatoba 5-piece neck, they feel incredible. They're so slick, and it's such a wonderful sort of satin feel to the instrument that it is great. But I think when it comes to an instrument like a simple, take the Mexican 50s classic P bass, it's passive with a relatively low output pickup and just one pickup.
Yeah.
So it needs to sound as good as it can. So you have a massive, thick, deep, one-piece maple neck, which is going to do exactly what that needs to, and a big, weighty chunk of alder for the body. And that's when those sort of real tone woods come into play more.
Definitely. And I think, Matt, you were almost going to say they talk about EMGs.
Well, I was just going to put in a quick thing about, you were saying about spalted maple, when you see it, on Gibsons when they'll do something with a bird's eye maple top or something like that. That at that point it doesn't make a huge difference to the overall tone because it's still maple. It's still, I think, probably from the same family, so it still has a similar tonal quality. I think it's just its overall finish. I mean, flame can vary. Flame is caused by a natural bend in the maple tree.
Yeah.
As it sways, it effectively
Creates a ripple in the
which
wood.
is why you see that some cheaper manufacturers have that's a crazy flame top. It's because they tie down the maple trees, and then as they grow in a U, they grow bent, and then they have a better flame in them.
Yeah, we were talking about that before when you found out about that, and I found that hilarious that they grow these trees to have a flame, and the more kind of proper the guitar is, they're actually just a more natural process. They let the tree sway in the wind.
Well, is it bird's eye? I think is a fungus.
It's like a disease.
It's like diseased
Really?
wood. Yeah, because I remember when I was much younger in the first guitar shop that I started going into, and knew the guys that work there, and he was a guitar tech as well, and someone had ordered in a crazy quadruple A bird's eye maple top, and he was like, yeah, it's just crazy to think it's just actually diseased wood.
Yeah.
Effectively.
That's mental. How do they possibly manage to make runs out of that stuff? I mean, they must actually have to infect the wood then.
Well, no, I don't. I'm not sure it's that. I think that it's just a common thing.
It's a
in this.
naturally
Oh,
occurring
right.
thing within wood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like tree flu.
Got it.
That's a serious thing.
Tree flu.
I had a tree once that died of tree flu.
Did you?
No. So we talked a little bit about how obviously the bodywood can affect the tone, and we touched briefly on how I guess pickups kind of affect the tone and play a huge part. And we've talked about this in the past when we've been talking about individual pickups. But let's run through some of that really. Firstly, obviously a lot of different electric guitar pickups. Different types, single coil, humbucking and P90 are the ones I've got down here, but there are obviously others. Let's just do a quick rundown of what those terms kind of mean really. What is a single coil pickup?
One single magnet that's just wound, and then obviously that for people who might not understand or never seen a guitar before, just the single bar that you see on a Strat.
They shouldn't really be listening to this podcast.
Well, you never know. They might be searching for something else, and they stumbled across it. I don't know. Single magnet that's wound, and then the way that humbucker then came about was that they were fairly noisy. So then a humbucker is effectively 2 single coils that are wound in series.
Yeah,
I always get confused between series
I
and
suppose
parallel.
the tonal
Wait, no,
attributes.
in parallel. They must be round parallel.
Oh yeah, it would be parallel, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, they run parallel, so the signal goes through them at the same time.
Yes,
parallel. Yeah.
So single coils. I was going to say softer sounding, but not really, because obviously on a telly they can be quite bright and quite sort of pokey. But humbuckers generally are going to be much beefier, going to have a lot more bottom end.
I suppose you think of single coils as being thinner, toppier, generally speaking.
Yeah, I always
and
hate.
also noisy when you're not playing.
I always hate the term thinner because that doesn't sound like a good.
No, it sounds like it will be detracting from the guitar.
Yeah.
But actually, if you buy a telly, what you want is that cutting, thin tone. Like, you want it to just kind of.
You want it to sound a bit bright, but then pickups can just vary just as much as woods can for tone in terms of what magnets are used, the strength or output of the overall pickup. The higher the output.
Can you talk us through a few sort of standard single coil options that we're seeing today?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's take for example a standard Strat. So they use custom shop Fat 50s pickups. So very, in terms of a Strat, very 50s like. So quite a mid-heavy sound, I would say, in the neck almost. Not too bright, not too bassy like a 60s Strat, but in the bridge position, very, very bright, very, very sharp sounding. And then as you go up to, say, something like a brand like Bare Knuckles, who do custom wound pickups, and they do something like the Rory Gallagher Irish Tour set, which is much higher output magnet, or like the Texas Specials, which are much higher output. They're much brighter, they push your amp a little bit harder. So they get you a sharper, fuller sound, right off the bat, really. So you can go for a softer sounding single coil, rhythmically probably a little bit darker, or you can go for a much higher output single coil.
And what are the limitations of a single coil? You say, what are its drawbacks?
It's difficult because for a long time people were like, if you were in a metal band, you wouldn't necessarily use single coils, but actually you are seeing it a lot more now.
We've mentioned it before, like Biffy Clyro.
Well, also the Ibanez Fireman,
really
the Paul Gilbert signature. He specifically said when he made that guitar, like, I want to use single coils because I love the tone, and they've progressed so much now that they're not particularly noisy when you're running high gain, which is why there's 3 single coils on that guitar.
You look at the we were talking about the Toshin Abassi earlier today, and that's an 8-string, and you would have thought for an 8-string it wouldn't have had the single coils in there wouldn't have had the tonal range to cope with the bottom end, but also the amount of drive that they use running through something like an Axfix or like a modelling amp.
You'd think they'd be super weak because there's 2 high output humbuckers in there as well.
Yeah.
You'd think that when you switch to the single coil it would just be like, this is basically unusable because it's such a it's such a difference between that and the humbuckers, and also make it an 8-string. You'd think a single coil couldn't really deal with that low end.
And I think the mix of it, of what type of pickup you use with a tonal wood, then that kind of then starts playing a bigger part because if you put a single coil in a Les Paul, I actually think it probably would sound fairly weak.
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, I'm not hearing any of the resonance of the tonal wood that I'm using. So then I think that's where humbuckers then obviously something that's much bigger in terms of its output and picks up a lot more the resonance of the strings and the body.
But then there are all the early Les Pauls were P90s, which are single coils.
But it's like an overwound single coil,
true.
isn't it?
But how much?
What's the advantage of overwinding? Why is it overwound?
It just makes it hotter. There's more the electromagnet becomes stronger.
And I suppose that's something we're seeing more today, isn't it? Pickups are getting hotter and they're becoming more commonplace. I mean, certainly for bass, the most common pickup change in a P bass would be the SPB3, the Seymour Duncan quarter pounder, which is the hottest pickup they do, the largest pole pieces.
Let's do bass in a second. I just wanted to cover why you would get a single coil pickup. What sort of sound would you get a guitar that's primarily a single coil guitar for?
For me, I prefer it. I mean, it's going to vary, but I prefer it more for rhythm stuff. But then, as a Strat player, I like having a warm neck pickup sound. When you've got a single coil and you go, even when it's not a Strat, and you get that kind of sound, you go, yeah, it sounds really Stratty.
Yeah.
You're like, hold on, is that a way that we describe things now, by how like Strat
How much like they are like another guitar?
Yeah. But actually, for kind of things like sort of funk and that sort of syncopated rhythm, I was talking at the custom shop night again about the Hitmaker that they're doing, and Fender Custom Shop released a few pictures of it this week, which is the Nile Rodgers.
I've not seen them yet.
Yeah, the Nile Rodgers Hitmaker, which is based on a 50s Strat that he plays, and those 50 pickups are very bright, they're very sharp, and they give you that kind of real, almost James Brown-esque sort of funk sound.
Yeah.
You know, so I think if you're going for something like that, because once again, I think because humbuckers have got more output, they would probably drive your amp a little bit harder, and they wouldn't give you that tight sound that you get from
clarity.
Yeah,
that's how I would describe it. I actually don't find humbuckers are tight sounding in any way, although they're kind of big and beefy sounding, and if you're using drive, they can be really good. They always to me they always feel a bit flabby. They don't have that direct nature that single coils do, and we'll talk about them in a bit, but that's why I really like P90s, is because they're really direct, but they're a bit hotter generally than the
quite
hotter,
abrasive
hotter
as well.
It's funny really, because you say like Les Paul, like a humbucker and a Les Paul, you can sound a bit flabby, but then when you put that same sort of humbucker in, say for example, a Strat, it sounds much tighter.
Yeah, again, like
and
we're
then
saying,
I think a lot of and then the wood once again comes into it as well.
I mean, the single coils aren't are kind of very nearly, I suppose, exclusively partnered with Alder or Ash. You rarely see them on kind of a mahogany or a walnut guitar or anything like that.
That Telebration mahogany Telecaster had a single coil in the neck, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's a very rare thing.
Yeah.
So why would someone go for a humbucker if we're saying that they are perhaps not as direct and not as tight sounding as single coils? Why would someone get a humbucking pickup?
I think for me, not necessarily you'd use it all the time, but they work really well for drive. So if you want more of that kind of rock sort of oomph, you just don't get it from a single coil. I think in the bridge. I think for if you go to a telly and you've got a bit of drive and you go to the bridge position, it's got this real cutting sort of bite to it. But when you use a Les Paul, you suddenly get all this kind of extra bottom end, all this extra
I agree. I think it does depend on the music type. I mean, I think certainly for punk rock, I think is relatively dependent on a humbucker.
Well, traditionally, I mean, I would say that it's probably moving away from that with the kind of more sort of jangly stuff. But yeah, I mean, Sex Pistols and all the way up to Green Day and Blink-182 is certainly all humbuckers,
But then, humbuckers vary so much, once again, in terms of the strength of the magnet and the output. I mean, you look at original PAF pickups, they're actually fairly low output. Yeah. They're quite woolly in their sound, they've got quite a lot of bottom end, but then that's why they work so well in guitars like 335s.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that another tone to think about that you definitely can't get from single coils is almost that tone wound off neck solo sound, maybe like Slash using it, that sort of thing. You just can't get that with a single coil. If you're kind of like a fan of, I don't know, sort of just general rock stuff, you'd really struggle to do that on a Strat or a Tele, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And also for jazzier stuff, on terms of big hollow bodies, you see like 175, you'd see more of a humbucker.
That's strange, isn't it? Because I suppose that's we're talking about single coils as being better for your clarity, and humbuckers as being your big sort of, as you say, general rock, big meaty pickups. But on the hollow bodies, which you would associate with, certainly not heavy rock stuff. Yeah,
it's that kind of neck pickup, jazz, tone wound off, hollow body type tone. That's what really does it, and it is weird that it's a humbucker.
Yeah.
How about P90s then? I kind of see them as halfway between the two, which is probably just it's probably undercutting what they can actually do. I just see them as like a nice halfway house between the kind of tightness and snappiness of single coils plus the slightly overwound chunkiness of humbuckers. Is that the right way to think of them?
I think so. I think that they cut through. They cut through a lot more and a lot easier than they're a bit more top endy. But again, it's not quite as simple as them just being more trebly. There is more treble there, but I think as well as there being more treble there, there's sort of, it's not that there's treble in at the expense of there being less bass. I think there's just there's more emphasis on the top end of the frequencies, which is what you sort of lose with something like the single coils, which is where it is there isn't a huge amount of bottom end, depending on the position and what pickup it is, obviously.
Did the Billy Joe Armstrong, that was a single P90 in the bridge?
No, the Billy Joe Armstrong was a P90H or an H90.
H90, I think they're calling it. It was like a hum cancelling P90.
It was like really, really hot. That guitar was completely amazing. It was such like that pickup just sounded completely phenomenal.
They've done a few actually. So I've got a guitar which is a Les Paul Junior with a P90 in the bridge, but at the same time they offered Les Paul specials. This is the early 2000s ish with two P100s, right, which were a hum cancelling P90,
right,
that actually for my ears didn't sound great, which I think is why they came up with the P90H or the H90.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to keep the tonal characteristics but lose the single coil hum from the P90. And I mean, the thing, we've talked about this before, but the thing that always impresses me with P90s is more so than either of the either single coil or humbucker, they work when you've got the volume down. Now, we always joke about why would you ever need a volume control? Surely it's just all the way up and that's how the pickup sounds best. I actually think the P90 is the exception to that rule.
It really does clean up a lot when you roll back the volume just a hair. Those it's a shame that those Les Paul Juniors are. I'm not sure. I don't think they're discontinued, but they're Gibson certainly aren't producing any at the moment. And I think that's a real shame because I think that that really adds something that even the 50s tribute stuff doesn't quite give you. I mean, those 50s tributes, don't get me wrong, they are great guitars. They are absolutely great guitars. But I think that single P90 Les Paul Junior just has the edge over some of the other instruments within that same sort of £600, £800 pound price range.
At the moment, while we're talking about it, this is unbongoed. But by the time this podcast goes out, we'll be able to talk about Gibson 2014. Mm-hmm. And actually, they're doing a lot of models with P90s in the neck. So SG Future.
Somewhere. In fact, if you keep talking, I might be able to load up the list of some of the models and we can actually go through a couple.
This is news even to me.
Well, we should save this for a separate podcast because I don't want to go too far into Gibson 2014. But there's definitely a model or a few of the models I should say, where they're mixing up humbuckers and P90s.
Right, okay.
That sounds awesome.
Which works really well, actually. And they're doing kind of what they've done, experimenting with the self-tuning stuff on the future models, but they're taking that a step further in 2014. So they're doing things like mixing up humbuckers and P90s. Some of them have got the robot tuners on there. These SG and Les Paul future guitars, they also come in bizarre colours.
Right, okay.
What was that colour, Matt, that we looked at?
Plum insane.
Plum insane.
Those are Joe's two favourite words.
This is going to be better than when we had the Man Sam and Gretsch.
We've still got that. Still got the Man Sam and Gretsch. It's around the corner.
Some of the models, because I think you were actually away when Nick Asnin from Gibson was here.
Yeah.
Some of the models they're doing are absolutely awesome.
There's going to be some fun stuff. There's some stuff. There's some stuff that is out there. Gibson are like. They're going all in this year.
All I can say is peace, man.
Yeah, peace, man.
Oh,
peace,
really?
Man.
And you guys don't know what this means yet because these models aren't, like I say, this is unbongoed as we speak.
Right.
But in the next couple of days, you will find out what the Les Paul piece is.
Oh my goodness!
It's gonna be fun for everyone to find out over the next week or so what this is all about.
I'm really excited.
Anyway. So that's pickups, really. Again, one of these things, pretty much the same as everything that we're talking about tonight. It's personal preference, and it varies on what your guitar is made out of and what style you want to do, and just what you like, really, as to what you should get.
Certainly, just to round up pickups on the bass.
Oh, we haven't talked about active circuits. You spoke about it briefly.
Yeah. I'll only mention it briefly, but
just as a kind of. Coming from a kind of layman's perspective, why should you get a passive circuit, and why should you get an active circuit?
Well, firstly, to give you kind of a little background on it, active circuitry is something that's taken off a lot more for bass than it has for guitar. Not that it's not there for guitar, but it's much, much more commonplace.
You see it with
bass.
EMG pickups primarily on the guitar side
on
of
guitar,
things.
exactly, but it's not exclusive to those sort of quite metally guitars on bass, because of course we have them on everything. Going back to things like Music Man Stingrays, which are
Music Man?
Music Man.
Yeah, it was
John Musicman.
Brian Spiderman.
Fine. Yeah, but Music Man are a relatively classic brand, and we get active EQs on them dating right back to their inception. But yeah, active circuitry basically gives you a higher output pickup, and it gives you access to EQ on your bass if the EQ on your amplifier was not enough for you.
Just one thing the way when someone comes in and asks about active and passive, the way that I explain it is that in a passive circuit, you can only ever take away. So your volume control and your tone control are taking away volume and taking away treble through capacitors. Is that right?
That's right.
Is that how parts work? Whereas in an active circuit, you can boost things. So you can boost volume by a certain amount of dB, or boost bass or boost treble by a certain amount through a circuit that's powered by a battery. Is that about the right description?
Yeah, exactly. And kind of more common recently, we've been having boost and cut circuits.
Yes.
And things used to be all boost, and it used to be 2-band. But more commonly recently, we're seeing kind of 3-band EQs across the board, all boost and cut, so bass, middle, and treble all dealt with.
And you can also do clever things like, certainly on the Ibanez stuff that we sell, switching where the mid frequency is set.
That's right. Yeah, they're introducing that a lot more. Yeah, because I suppose mid scooping is becoming a lot more common with active pickups. Active pickups are kind of there. Whilst you see it, on a lot of metal music, it's also there really to clean up your sound a lot. It's much easier to get a really kind of pure tone from active circuitry. So skipping out those mids will really, really help with that.
So when you lay it down on paper, really, an active circuit kind of seems like the only way to go, almost, because it gives you so much more. But
that's
actually,
if you think that what was there in the first place wasn't enough.
Well, exactly. All of us here, I think, own passive basses.
Yeah.
Why would we do that when active basses are so freely available? What's the advantage of going with a passive bass?
Well, like I said before, that a passive instrument gives you kind of access to the tones of the wood that your instrument and the construction of your instrument as well a lot more. There's kind of something that sounds a lot more authentic. So I think saying it sounds a lot more woody is a little bit of a cop out, but it's exactly that. There's something a lot more traditional. And a lot less hi-fi about a passive instrument, which I really like. There's something just a bit more rock about it. It's great being able to sound super clean, or with an active circuit, or if you want to add drive to it, making your drive sound really, really pure and defined. But there's a lot to be said for the kind of that.
You can really tell when someone kind of like. Someone's got like a P bass plugged in with a bit of drive. You can really feel it.
It's just that kind of natural aggression.
You can also tell when someone's definitely using an active bass.
Yeah,
I think they're very, very different sounds.
I tell you what I hear when I hear people play active basses. If you really try and give it some welly and you really try and dig in, I hear clipping, and I know you don't, but that's what it sounds like to me when the circuit's trying to keep up with what your hands are doing and trying to emulate what would be going on if you just had a passive instrument.
Yeah. So I guess the other component, and we've talked about the body and the pickups, the other thing that really makes a difference, I know you've written the bridge here, Joe, and there is obviously a lot of things around that, but I think just in terms of time, we're not going to have time to cover the bridge. I would say the biggest thing is the neck.
Yeah.
Because primarily when people come in, they say, I don't really know what guitar I like, don't really know what kind of sound I want. Actually, the first thing that we'll ask them is, should we try some stuff out? Tell me what feels good under your hand. And I would say that
absolutely
the main
this
thing
is the one that will apply the most to playability.
Definitely. Obviously, the body contours and stuff we've highlighted as well, but it is really the neck that governs that playability. You've made a few notes here. firstly, I mean, a few things to think about. Firstly, the radius. Now, Matt, what does the radius mean? A lot of people won't know what radius is.
What is the radius?
Indeed.
The radius is effectively the curvature of the fretboard.
Okay.
So if you take one giant circle, if I remember maths, or whatever,
specifically a giant circle.
Specifically a giant circle. It's the
radius is half the diameter.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing that I was hoping someone would jump in with.
Right. Okay.
So most, as far as
so what you're saying is, if you continued the curve of the fretboard round in a circle, so it connected back up with itself. Yeah, the radius is half the distance across that circle.
That's correct. Yeah, because you've got without turning this into like a maths podcast or whatever, you've got 3 measurements with a circle. You've got the circumference, which is the distance all the way around the outside.
And welcome to the GAK GCSE special.
I failed all of mine. So
welcome to
you've got the diameter,
BBC
which is the
GCSE bite size.
You've got the diameter, which is the bit that goes straight across, and then you've got the radius, which is half the diameter.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
You don't need to have that sort of information when learning to play guitar.
But it is interesting.
But it is handy. It is interesting.
And what's interesting about it is, so if you say, okay, well look, this guitar, for example, the guitar that you bought a couple of weeks ago has got a 7.25,
which is the much more which was the Fender standard.
Yes.
In the beginning.
So you've got your guitar. Your Telecaster has a radius. The fingerboard has a radius of 7.25 inches.
So let me get this right. So that's not very curved.
No, that is very curved.
Oh no, sorry, that's what I meant.
Because it's a very tight.
Any more curved than that, and you would basically, the neck might as well be a circle.
Just a cylinder.
And then for something like a Les Paul, you get compound radiuses as well.
We'll get into that.
Well, yeah, but for example, a compound radius is where it's one radius at one end of the neck and one radius at another end of the neck. And with some of the Les Pauls, in fact, I think the Les Paul standards.
Les Pauls are 12s.
They've got Yeah, is it 12
no, you're
the whole
thinking
way down?
You're thinking of asymmetrical neck profiles.
No, you're thinking of Fender Deluxes, which go from 9.5, which is now standard 14.
To 14, right? Okay, but so 14. That's a. If you think, 14 inches is that's a big circle, and so that's a flat rate. That's a very, very flat rate.
Because the curvature of So
basically the way that we were talking about it the other day.
What I was going to ask is, how has this evolved, and what are the differences between those, in terms of how this translates to playing?
In terms of playability. Now, I'll give how I felt when this guitar that I picked up a couple of weeks ago. How it's for me. You'll now picking up any normal guitar, 90% of the time it will be 9.5 or flatter. So most Strats will be 9.5. Now when you play 7.25, because they're more curved, for rhythmic work it feels fine down the lower end. It feels a little bit chunkier. But when you go to the top, when you're bending notes, when you're say on the 12th fret and you're bending up say the 15th fret, because the fretboard is so curved, when you get to about a tone up on a bend, it chokes out. Because you're actually hitting the curvature of the board.
Yeah. Right.
So as time has gone on in guitar playing, especially for Fenders, that has now flattened off.
Yeah.
And then when you go to say for something like Ibanez's now, which are 12s, 14s, and I think some of them even go flatter.
I think some of them go 16 as well.
Yeah, I think some of them do. And then that's for a player who's a shredder, who's then going to have their thumb resting flat against the back of the neck, who's doing a lot of stuff where you're not necessarily putting the thumb over the end and kind of
it's just
putting more into the bend.
It almost comes off as a totally flat piece of wood, doesn't it?
Like playing the Ibanez, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
Whoa.
Oh, wait.
No, hold off.
Okay, all right, okay.
Let's say Joe Brantland's staff pick this week is very special.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay, all right, well, you'll see why. But anyway, if you go to, say, some more extreme guitars, they'll have a much, much flatter... And I think that much flatter board, and that comes down to... Because generally they're used for maybe slightly more extreme styles.
Yep.
But then, Gretsch's have a 12, and I don't know whether maybe that was a design in terms of the way they work with the Bigsby or where they work with the
I've never thought about
trem.
that, actually. A Gretsch board does feel really flat. It feels like a flat slab.
But then playing quite a flat board like that, to me, feels quite weird. But I'd been so used to playing 9.5 because I played a custom shop Strat for so long. Going to this this vintage telly that I bought, it's 7.25 and it's got much skinnier frets on it. So playing it was like, I just was slipping all over the place because I was like, it felt like I was playing something that was so curved. It almost felt like the edge of the fretboards were curved up and I couldn't almost hit certain notes.
The other thing with a 7.25 inch radius board is you need to use a different capo.
Oh no, I didn't think of that.
Yeah. You'll need a different capo because they're too curved. It's the same as if you.
It won't touch the E strings, will it? It'll just hold clamp down the middle too heavily.
It's the same as It's exactly the same as why you can't use a standard capo on a nylon strung.
Well, yeah, because nylon strung. If you think about nylon strungs, are totally flat.
Yeah.
They are just a slab.
Yes.
But that's that instrument evolving in a slightly different manner. That's not because there's a lot of bending that goes on.
I think you find that vintage players or people who have been playing for a little bit longer tend to prefer 7.25 just mainly because that's what you've been used to.
Yeah.
Whereas now most people who come up to me who are a little bit older but probably had an early Japanese Strat or something like that, and who want to buy a custom shop, they want a 9.5 rather than the 7.25 they've been used to because it just feels so much easier to play.
I just want to talk about one more thing about the neck, which is the other main component of the neck is the fretboard.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've talked about in terms of radius and how that makes a difference, but there are obviously quite a lot of different woods used in the construction of the fretboard. I guess let's start with the main two, being maple and rosewood.
Are we speaking specifically about the board? Because obviously the neck shank itself.
Well, I would say, obviously the neck itself will make a difference, but I think on most of the guitars we sell, you're looking at maple neck.
Or mahogany.
On the Gibson side of things.
Rose. Oh, are you talking about
the neck itself?
Right, okay.
So let's just focus on the board, really, and how that makes a difference. I would say for us, who play a lot of guitars, I guess we can tell the differences between a maple and a rosewood. But I think a lot of people who come in might not necessarily.
No,
a lot of people think
you've got
doesn't make so much
woods
difference
in there. I mean, you see. I mean, I know Pal Farrow is a type of rosewood, but it's very different in sound. So you see a bit of that, and you've also got ebony as well on the other side, and on basses you're starting to see ebonite or ebonol as well, which is reconstituted ebony. But I suppose if we're going to talk about the major two.
Well, I mean, and as well, you on guitars you're seeing things that are now totally different, that aren't even wood. Things like Rich Light, which are wood composites and things like that.
Yeah,
and the thing is,
maple from Gibson.
Well, I mean, the thing is, before we get into kind of the main two, for a long time, people, especially on Fender and Gibson, when they changed from these main two, people are like, oh, I can't believe it. They're not using, rosewood or ebony or anything like that. But actually, a lot of boutique manufacturers, a lot of other manufacturers, have been using different woods for quite a while.
Yeah.
Even certain companies like Charvel that we deal with, have been using baked maple for a while, and maybe slightly more sustainable woods. And it's funny really how you with maple and rosewood, which are the two main ones you'd associate really with Fender, and then I suppose ebony more with earlier Les Pauls and rosewood
and Les Paul customs and things like that.
Yeah.
So what are the differences? What's firstly the sound difference between, let's say, maple, rosewood and ebony, which I guess are the three most common woods, and what's the feel difference between those?
The feel difference for me, if you're playing maple feels, and this is a weird one to me, it feels like it's got more slip to it, because I think generally, because it's a harder wood, it's a tighter grain, when I play it, when you're bending notes, it feels like I'm almost going to overshoot certain bends.
Can the same be said about ebony as well? Because that's a closed grain, much harder.
Yeah.
And opposed to rosewood, which is that
more,
feels like a
slower.
open,
it feels more open grain. You tend to feel the wood more, like a lower action on rosewood.
I feel like you can press into rosewood more than maple.
To me, it feels like a softer wood.
Yeah, I think
and that makes it tonally a much darker wood.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
And maple is generally a much brighter wood. Probably once again down to it being closed grain, it being quite a heavy wood, which adds once again a little bit of resonance and quite a lot of top end.
Yeah.
Go.
I was going to say I think Krista actually summarised kind of the maple rosewood thing quite well. One of our chaps in basses, when he talks about it for bass, because obviously you see maple a lot more on more traditional basses, and it is virtually obsolete if you look at modern basses.
Yeah, there's only maybe one Ibanez model that has it. Maybe no ESPs.
Yeah, no ESPs. One Ibanez model, which I don't think they make anymore.
Right.
You think of the SR 500 that they did with the maple.
Yeah, or
rosewood
300s. I think they still offer with the maple.
Oh, okay, cool. But yeah, it's virtually exclusive, the more classic stuff, and that's because it's brighter. Krista, much like yourself and probably you as well, more fans of maple than rosewood, and Krista always used to say that it's because maple being a toppier wood, that treble's there, and you can always take that away. You can always dial that out with your tone circuit, but you can't dial it in, not as effectively.
That's very true, and I think that's more important. I'd say that's probably more important with bass.
I think it is kind of more a bass
guitar.
thing.
Yeah. But that's really true. I hadn't really thought about that.
I was always a big fan of maple until I got my Yamaha BB, which was rosewood, and now I really want a 62 P bass, so that I've got a rosewood boarded P bass, because I've totally love the way that rosewood feels to play, and I really like that sort of that softness that it offers. But until then I'd been exclusively maple, and I think it's completely that. Maple just has this bright toppy nature that makes it much more, gives you maybe more tonal options than I think it's given credit for. It's almost viewed on the bass front as the lesser alternative.
Yeah,
the less professional alternative.
Maple
maybe.
is.
Yeah, maple is.
Yeah, I think people kind of see it as unsophisticated almost on bass.
Yes, that's exactly what I was getting at, which I completely disagree with. But
just quickly, ebony looks like dark wood like rosewood, but actually tone-wise very bright, very close grain.
And actually, I mean, you said it's one of the main three, but actually I think you very rarely see it now.
They're kind of fading it out.
Well,
it is fading out.
There's not very much ebony left in the world. Is the big issue here, and this, I guess, this kind of opens up a different discussion, which perhaps isn't appropriate for right now, and that comes down to the sort of the ethical and environmental issues of guitar building. Maybe you think about like piano keys being made of ivory. You're obviously not going to get that anymore. With something like, how justifiably can you use something like an endangered wood?
Well, exactly. It's also, ebony's really slow to grow, just like rosewood, which is why we're starting to have trouble with this. It's why, incidentally, it's not a problem to grow alder, ash, agathis, basswood, things like that. Quick to grow. You can have sustainable forests and. And
what I would say is, Jay, you're 100% right. This is not a discussion that we should have right now. But what we should do is flippantly discuss our staff picks of the week.
Jay Cross, vegan and guitar activist.
Jay Cross, what guitar have you been playing this week? What should people try out?
Okay, I wanted to have a look at something completely different this week.
So do I. I'm looking at your face, and it's completely different.
No, just
Jay's had Botox for anyone.
Yeah.
Give over. I just based on what we, Joe, you inspired me a little bit today. Your the whole reevaluating what it is that you play and why you play it and what's important to you. I wanted to try something completely different and something that I've, I see every day. I picked up an Italia. I've never really spent much time with Italias.
They look great.
They do look great. And perhaps you could look at it and go, well, this the guitar that I was playing was the Italia Rimini, the 12-string.
A really cool pole-looking one.
It's essentially a Rickenbacker copy. Although I'm sure if anyone from Italia is listening,
I don't think you're even allowed to use the term Rickenbacker.
You're definitely not
legally.
No. Of course not. No. But that kind of is what it looks like. I mean.
It's got a bit of a Rickenbacker vibe.
It's got a Rickenbacker vibe to it. But it was great. It comes in the one that I was playing comes in this sort of marbly blue pearl
Perloid.
finish. Well, no, it's called Blue Pearl actually.
Okay, but it's a perloid finish.
Yeah, very true. Yes, it is, and it's got those perloid inlay. I think it's abalone.
It is.
It is abalone. Yes, it is abalone. And it just sounded great. And I think it's a really good budget, I guess. If you can, it's £400. I guess 400 quid.
Affordable.
It's an affordable 12-string. If you don't want to go for a Ricky, or you don't want to go for a Gibson, or
Well, I would say that it's great because it's one of the only electric 12 strings that we sell now.
Yeah.
There's so few available. Fender used to do them. They're not doing anything at the moment.
No, not so
Burns do a rather splendid one.
Burns do a nice one. The double six.
The double six. You can still get the Dan Electro.
Oh yeah.
Although they're pretty few and far between. We've got a red one in at the moment, and we've got a black one due in next week as well.
This week, if you're listening to the podcast.
This week, if you're listening to the podcast, yes. But yeah, the Rimini, I just think the Rimini's really, really cool. And Italia are one of those companies who they're one of those sort of ever presents. Like we've always sort of had them.
Yeah, they're kind of like Dan Electro in that we've always sort of got them.
But they're never really. But like they do some really cool stuff. Like the Mondial, is great. And what's the?
I've got a Speedster. That thing's awesome.
Oh yeah, you do. You've got that Speedster which you set up for baritone
with one humbucker that's coil tapped with an inbuilt distortion and an Atari game kill switch on it. Atari button kill switch. I somehow managed to turn on one pickup guitar into something that's got 3 different settings and a kill switch.
Sweet deal.
Excellent.
It's awesome, and it's in baritone.
Well, this Rimini 12-string that I was playing today doesn't have any of those features.
It does have 12 strings.
But it does have 12 strings, and it was really, really easy to play, and sounded amazing. I stuck just for kicks. I stuck a cap on the 5th fret and played some open chords, and it sounded so good.
Really awesome.
Yeah, it sounded really good.
You don't see many kind of big band players using Italians. The only person I can think of is Nicky Wire.
Oh yeah, famously using one of the Mondial basses, I believe.
That's right.
I don't know who that is.
From the Manic Street Preachers.
He's got his own signature one.
Oh really?
Actually. Yeah, his own special finish on it.
I mean,
it is just a Mondial, but in his own colour.
They are a kind of funny brand, but the stuff they make is good gear.
It is good. It is good, and. Yeah, what's the other one? The Maranello?
Maranellos are good.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's some good Italia stuff out there that's worth having a look at.
Matt Knight, what have you been playing this week? What should people check out?
Well, you know me, I like pedals. So
Still the same old G?
Still the same old G. And I thought this week, with... You know how much I love the M5? And I just don't think anything would ever...
Line 6 M5.
Line 6 M5. I don't think how anything would ever take my place. But this
you haven't been cheating on the M5, have you?
Well, I might have. I'm basically...
Did you take gut shots of it?
No.
Okay.
I didn't, unfortunately. But the Zoom MS70 CDR chorus delay reverb. It is... Do you remember, well, a few podcasts ago, many moons ago, Mark, you talked about the guitar one which had all the distortion effects, all the amp modelling.
MS70G.
Yes, and they do an MS70B.
Which is?
The bass one.
Okay.
And this one, the CDR is chorus delay reverb, and it's basically a multi-effects that has all those, but it has some
delay and reverb.
Yeah, but it has some phases and flanging as well. And it sounds wicked. But the amazing thing is, where it has an edge over something like the Line 6 M5, is that you can actually have up to 6 effects at once.
What?
So there's been a bit of a trend for these recently. They're kind of they look like single pedals,
but they're actually
multi-effects.
So you could have a chorus going into a modulated delay, going into like a shimmer reverb.
Oh my god!
Into like a spring reverb, and then into...
I could have a phasing delay.
You could have a phasing
fuzz.
Flanger.
You can't have a fuzz.
Oh,
there's no distortions in there.
There's
right?
no distortions in there. It's all just modulations.
Fine.
But then you've got the trusty M5 for that. But yeah, it's the fact that you can have so many effects on at once that really got me. Which was kind of cool.
It is a kind of a weird trend, really, in that I think people don't want traditional. At the moment, not so much traditional multi-effects.
No,
they don't want the big.
so much room.
Well, they don't want the big board. They don't want a load of effects they're not going to use. So I think what companies are doing is kind of almost breaking the individual parts out, but giving you more options than just say a normal chorus pedal. This has got how many different chorus pedal type sounds?
It's 16 choruses, 26 delays, 29 reverbs, and then a load of other sounds as well.
See, even the problem with the M5, I mean, the M5, whilst it's a single stomp box, is pretty sizable. I mean, the only reason mine's not on my board yet is that I don't have any room, and I was looking at it, and I was like, right, I'm going to have to take 3 pedals off in order to fit. Like a minimum, it's 3 pedals worth of space.
You need to employ me, pro real estate man.
Matt will squeeze it in.
A new board.
I just think these kind of make sense really. What sort of money are we looking at?
They are under 90 quid, so they are cheaper than an M5 as well at the same time. They run on batteries, and you can plug headphones directly in.
I think there's a USB as well, is that right?
Yes, so you can actually, Zoom have like a save and share thing on their website, so you can save your own patches and you can share them on the Zoom website. You can download other people's, so you can actually set all your own preset sounds.
Is there any editing software?
There's no editing software, I believe.
But you can download patches.
You can download patches, and you can do everything on the screen, and it looks like little pedals when you do it as well. So you've got the main switch on the top, which also works like navigational buttons, and then 3 knobs, which then vary on what you're doing. And I just think a cool pedal, once again, just to have on your board that maybe has got some sounds in you wouldn't necessarily use. Like a lot of people want those shimmer type reverbs with an upper octave.
But maybe don't want to stretch to the Strymon.
But yeah, maybe don't want. I was talking to a guy today, and he was like, "Oh, it's 250 quid," and I was like, "Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it sounds better than anything." And he was like, "Yeah, but I haven't got that sort of money." And then I was like, "Well, something like this it's got all those sounds in. They might sound slightly different, but they almost have that sort of cool digital quality to them as well, which I kind of like."
It kind of works on chorus.
Yeah.
Here's a nice, good sort of resounding feature about the Zoom. Do you know who bought one the other day from us? I told you, Pete Townsend.
Did he really?
He bought 3. Yeah, he bought 3 from us.
Of those, the MS-70Gs.
Yeah.
Wow.
Why wouldn't he just contact Zoom and be like,
I don't know.
Hi,
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Because we didn't have any in.
They're definitely Christmas presents.
Yeah, they must be. Probably.
Joe Branton.
Yeah.
Now, hanging up in this room is maybe your Christmas present to yourself.
Joe, can I play it when you talk about it?
Yeah, but I want...
This would be the first ever bit of guitar playing that we've done on a guitar podcast that's now run for 31 episodes.
Is that how many we've done?
Yes.
31?
Joe Branton.
Let's see if people can guess what it is from me playing it. What does that sound like?
Sounds pretty bad, to be honest.
Yeah. Alright, it's not in tune. But what it doesn't sound like... Listen to this. This is the highest note. This is a bass. And that's my highest note.
Joe Branton, what are you holding in your hands now?
I'm holding in my hands the new 7-string Ibanez BTB bass.
What is the name of it?
BTB7.
It's the BTB7 NT. For natural.
No, NT for neck through, surely.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, probably. Fine.
So, tell us about this bass.
It's part of the BTB series, so it's got all kind of the same features as the 5 and 6-string versions, but they've introduced a high F for bass play.
Holy...
yeah, that's right. A high F string on a bass. This is, you
Is there even a high F on a guitar? Do guitars go that high?
Well,
no, guitars can't go that high.
I certainly don't play any notes that high on a guitar.
Do you want to know the thing? I mean, the high F on this is a 20.
It's not even wound.
Yeah, it's not even wound.
It's a plain 20.
It's a 20. Well, it's not a plain 20. It's
a flat. It's like a flatty.
Yeah.
It feels like a cheese wire.
Yeah, I know, it's really weird.
That's what this bass is.
Like,
bass and cheese.
And cheese.
Maybe that's what the F's there for.
Perfect for Christmas.
20 sort of flat wound sort of thing. Yeah.
So what else is obviously it's neck through, as the name implies. Monorail's bridge on there.
Yeah, monorail bridge. That's something that Ibanez have had for a little while, and have put on kind of all their high-end SRs and their BTB series. You've got each of your strings dealt with on an individual bridge piece, which is great. It means that you're not carrying those vibrations across the strings if you're playing an individual one. You've got a 3-band EQ, boost and cut, and you've got a mid shift as well, like we were talking about earlier.
What pickups are in there? Because they look kind of odd.
They are, aren't they?
They're kind of slim like a single coil, but I assume they're not single coils.
No, they're not single coils. So they're still soap bars, and they're Ibanez's own design, which is cap, which is what they've put in all their BTB series stuff. And don't be fooled because it's their own pickup. The cap stuff is absolutely brilliant. But yeah, they've kind of redesigned them, I guess, because they need to be a wider range. For the 7-string, and I'm assuming for that reason they've made them thinner than the cap pickups that you see on their 5 and 6-string, and obviously an awful lot wider. They've also gone for a gloss finish. It's normally a satin finish on.
Yeah, I noticed that. They just seem to have gone for. They've gone all out really. It's gold hardware. It's high gloss finish.
So awesome.
It's a neck that looks like a rowboat oar.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So that neck, I mean, that is massive. I mean, I found it really difficult to align my fingers, my left to right, across 7 strings.
Yeah.
It was really weird, but it's a 7-piece neck. Shall I talk you through it?
Go on.
The 7-piece neck is maple, babinga, maple, walnut, maple, babinga.
Maple. Surely the last one is maple.
Yeah, otherwise that'd look quite weird.
Maple.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's symmetrical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've not gone. Okay, well for the bass notes we're gonna.
That'll be.
Wait, it's a 7-piece neck. Is that 1 piece per string?
Very good.
Yeah,
Very
there you
good.
go.
A different tonal wood for every string.
So, I think we're suitably impressed.
Yeah.
I really want it.
It's a bit ridiculous.
Just needs to go through like 20 delay pedals.
Well, you know, I mean, extended range is a thing this year, isn't it? 8 strings are becoming proliferate. We were talking about, before we were doing the podcast, about, I can't remember the band, but someone relatively famous that I follow on Twitter was mentioning that they're changing their main 8 string is now going to be a Schecter, as if an 8 string was
they've
just
got
something.
a few different 8s to choose from.
You know, last I checked, there were only like 2 companies making 8 strings.
I think next year there's a couple of companies with 9 strings.
Nines.
Yeah,
because like
exactly.
EMG and that have been working on 9-string pickups.
But this is kind of that, isn't it? This is the bassist version of the 8 string.
But it's funny how the basses go higher where all the guitars go lower.
Well,
so eventually they're just gonna
hold up, because we've been talking about a bass that's masquerading as a guitar. My staff pick this week is a guitar that's masquerading as a bass. I want to talk about the Gibson SG baritone.
Oh my goodness!
This guitar is absolutely wonderful.
I am super excited about this.
So to give it its full name, Gibson Limited Edition SG baritone, only comes in an alpine white.
The best colour.
I didn't know what to pick this week, and then Chris, who is one of our guys who works on the shop floor here, just went. He had it in his hand, and it sort of turned to me and went, "This is your staff pick this week." And yeah, it is. I guess it just kind of looks like an SG special almost. It's a no scratch plate open coil humbucker SG, all in white, including the back of the neck. And it's baritone. I assume it was tuned B2B, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm trying to hang up the.
Matt's nowhere near his microphone.
Matt's trying to hang up the 7-string.
That's the other thing. The 7-string doesn't fit in a wall hanger.
Yes.
B2B.
They are tuned B2B, yeah.
B2B, 2 humbuckers, but it's got coil taps in there as well, coil splits in there. I, to be honest, I only got to plug it in really briefly, and I plugged it into an orange that was gained all the way up, loads of bass end, and it just sounded like swamp rock.
Do you know what actually impressed me more was actually the clean tones from it.
Yeah.
So, like, magical was the only way I could.
Magical.
They do. It does have that
It was
real,
just like real bottom end kind of. Like I wanted to go and play it in a church with loads of reverb.
Yeah.
And call the gods down.
Made you feel holy.
It did. It has that kind of almost like epic feel to it, doesn't it? It really, even on the distortion, it felt more than it was almost. I don't know why. There's just something about that baritone tuning.
How much is it hitting the shelf at?
1149, which is
only the same price as well, it's only a little more than most of the standard SGs.
Yeah, and it is a bit more stripped down, but it's kind of going with the aesthetic of the kind of the guitar they've gone for. You know, it's no scratch plate, uncovered pickups. Yeah, I was super impressed. And like you say, it's really hard to put your finger on why really, but it's that real sludgy, dirty blues kind of. You know, you hit that low B string, and it's just like, yeah, this is doing exactly what a baritone needs to do.
Yeah, it's just I just love baritone guitars.
Yeah, I think we should maybe have a dedicated baritone section in the shop now.
Yeah, or we should do a
Let's
podcast
do a baritone and extended range podcast.
Yeah.
Can you get any left-handed baritones?
No.
Nothing is standard. You could quite easily flip a Dan Electro round, I think.
Dan
really
Electro don't do a baritone standard.
Oh, not
they
anymore.
do. Oh, they do. We've got them on the system.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't think they were. I thought they discontinued it all.
Oh no.
Oh, excellent. Okay. That's
There
good.
are some new ones.
Oh, nice.
And I want one.
Oh dear. Gents, let's do some questions. Only one this week, and to be honest, it's not really a question. But it's something that needs a kind of recap of something that we've talked about before. This is from David via email. He says, "Hi gents, as a regular listener to the podcast, I don't recall you mentioning the Vox Valvetronic range of modelling amps. I have one for home practice, and for the cost, I find the range of tones to be pretty good, but I'm no means an advanced guitarist. Please tell me what you think of them." Now, we've definitely talked about them before.
I've got one.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I read it, I was like, Jay has one.
Yeah, I've got one of these. I've got a VT20, which I really, really like. I think it's with all of these things. There's a few options if you're looking at small transistor practice amps. I think the front runners are the Vox Valvetronic series, the Roland Cube series, and the Fender Mustang series. Now, they each do something slightly different. I think the reason I like the Roland stuff is it's all incredibly simple. You know, you're modelling, you've got like 8 amp models, and all your effects are there. You don't have a huge amount of control over the effects, but they're all very, you know, you can have a couple selected at any one time, and they're just there with very simple knobs,
rotary controls,
absolutely,
rather than any channel hopping, which is
you then at the other end of the spectrum, you've then got the Mustang stuff. Now, the Mustang stuff is really cool because you can download that Fender Fuse software, which lets you plug the amp straight into your computer, and you can get really in depth with how, like, layering effects, and it's all about, it's kind of expanding on what on patches, and you know, you kind of have a multi-effects pedal built into a cool sounding guitar amp. Now, personally, for me, that's a little bit more than I want. You know, I want to be able to plug my amp in at home and just turn it on and play it. The Vox stuff, I think, is a bit of a halfway house between those two. You know, all the controls, like you say, you've got your rotary controls, and they're there. Everything's there in front of you. You've got a bunch of effects. You can only have 2 on at any one time. I think you have 3 actually at any one time. But yeah, it's all just there in front of you. You don't have to plug it in, and now you can get really in depth with it. You know, there are 33 amp models on there to choose from, but they're all relatively easy to access. I think maybe in hindsight, just because of the amount of time I sometimes I spend fiddling around with it, I think probably I would have gone for the Roland Cube if I'd bought one again.
I think so. I think just for having the Roland Jazz Chorus.
Well, yeah, it's the clean sound. But that said, when I use it at home, there's a Selma treble and bass setting on there, which is really nice, and I use that. And there's also, you know, there's some really nice Fender sounds on there, and there's of course the AC15, which, you know, I thought I'd get in there because we've not spoken about this week.
Well, you have to speak about it every week.
Absolutely, and you know, so they're built in there as well. So there's some really, really cool sounds on there. But I think. And I think if if that's what you want, if you want to spend a bit of time and you want to have all those options, then absolutely. For me personally, if I'm going to sit down at home and play guitar, I just want to be able to turn it on and have a good clean sound, or a bit of drive and a load of reverb, and I think that the Roland probably offers that a little bit quicker. Basically, I'm saying that if you're really lazy and not very good with electronical equipment.
So you.
Basically, if you're me, then the Roland's probably the one to go for. That said,
Are you giving yourself advice on the podcast?
Well, I mean, I think I'm lamenting a poor decision, but justifying my decision in one fatal swoop. I mean,
as long as you feel better.
But this is something that we talk about every week. Every week we'll say, "Oh yeah, I had one of those, but I should have got the other thing." But I really like what I got, and so I wouldn't really swap it. And all of a sudden, I've contradicted everything that I've just said within one sentence. So,
welcome to the crazy mind of Jay Cross.
So, David, great amp. Thanks for emailing. They are good. I think you made a good choice. There we go.
Once
Because
again,
I made the same choice.
I long for the day when Jay Cross does a podcast on his own.
It's going to be so good.
Just 2 hours of contradictions.
Do you think he'll do other voices?
No, I don't need to. I can barely do my own voice, let alone
And his own voice is bad enough. David, thanks very much for emailing in. I'm not 100% sure that answered your question. If you've got any other questions, or you want to offer Jay Cross life advice, do email in podcast@gak.co.uk. You can also get us on Twitter at GAK_co_UK, or on Facebook, facebook.com/GAK music. Or if you want to talk to me about the podcast, or guitars in general, or you want to show me pictures of your guitars, you can get me on Twitter is the best way, at @mark_random. Jay Cross, how can people get in touch with you?
You can shoot me an email at j.cross@gak.co.uk, or you can get me on Twitter at JAYBN1.
Matt Knight, how can people get in touch with you, and what should they be talking to you about?
You can talk to me about anything. just get in touch. I'm lonely.
Matt's got a 3-hour round trip to work at the moment, so
yeah.
anyone who can tweet him between the hours of 7 and 8:30 in the morning, and
on nights like this, since I've just missed my train, 8:45 to 9:53.
Oh no, you missed the train.
Yeah, can email me at matt.knight@gak.co.uk, or you can tweet me matt_knightsy.
That's Knight with SIE on the end.
Nice.
Joe
I was
Branson.
hoping that everyone would say that, and it'd become a catchphrase.
Joe Branson, how can people?
Knight with SIE.
you're like Truman from the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Joe Branson, how can people get in touch with you?
If you want to bung me an email, you can do on joe.branton@gak.co.uk. Or if you want to tweet me, then you can tweet me at Joseph_900. I'll be talking a lot about extended range basses, and
always
also
talking about extended.
Yeah, but look how far they can extend.
I'm talking about 7 strings, but kind of more importantly, I think this week, I need some help. I need to get
That's
another
every week.
P-bass. So I need some help and advice.
You need to get a new P bass.
Another P bass, yeah.
American standard with maple
No, I
neck.
don't, because I don't like modern ones. It has to be a classic one.
So basically, we need to find you a vintage bass and somehow afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for listening this week. Next week, where are we up to? What will the date be next week?
Today's the 20th.
Oh, it's the 5th.
So we're coming up for
Today's
our
the
gear of the year.
27th. So depending on what day we do, I guess if we do
doing
it
it-
Wednesday,
we're
it'll
doing
be
it
the 4th.
Thursday.
Oh, no, next week. I know what next week is.
Next week's the PV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wait, we'll
Yeah,
be
'cause tomorrow is
recording that next week. Yeah, so next week we'll have Perry from Pendulum. He's the guitar player in the Pendulum, who are kind of like a dubstep, drum and bassy kind of band. They've had some big
One of
tunes.
those modern bands.
One of those modern bands. He's going to come in and talk to us about how he uses the PV Auto-Tune 200 guitar.
I hear he loves effects.
He loves effects. You're going to have a lot to talk about.
Maybe I can go on tour with him as his personal advisor.
He loves effects. He loves kind of modern guitar sounds, and like I said, the PV Auto-Tune 200 guitar. So it'll be interesting to get his thoughts on how those guitars work, how you can use them for not just auto-tuning, but weird tunings and drop tunings and fun stuff like that. So that'd be really fun. And then the week after, I think we start Gear of the Year, which is when we talk about and argue about what is the best bit of gear this year.
Argue as well.
Which I think we're going to try and do 5 podcasts in a week.
Sweet.
There's going to be a lot to talk about.
5 podcasts in a week.
Yes.
I definitely have to. I will need to stay at your house, Mark Packham.
That's fine.
We will be podcasting so much that we may as well just do it all through the night until the early hours.
So do stick with us for the next couple of weeks. We've got some exciting stuff coming up, and we might try and do something special for Christmas after the Gear of the Year. I'm not quite sure yet. So
if it's going to be Christmas... like last year, where you dressed up as like a girl version of one of Santa's helpers, I'm not up for it.
Christmas,
you in pop socks is scary.
Just to clarify, this didn't ever happen.
Christmas Day is a Wednesday. We're not podcasting on Christmas Day.
We are Christmas Day.
Skyping it. We're doing it all over Google Plus Hangout.
Anyway, thanks so much for listening this week. As you can hear, we've got some fun stuff coming up. Do stick with us for the upcoming weeks, and do get in touch with questions and feedback. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
To think there's basses out there that are like that use more expensive woods that also have fan frets and inlay design.
Yeah, it's big.